I think you're really going to expect, obviously, a very strong reaction, Bev. We've seen strong reactions from him over the week, at least verbally. Now, his critics have really said that the first round of sanctions that he released earlier this week on Russia were not hard hitting enough, and they were really too little, too late. However, the administration very much pushing back against that criticism, saying they would, in due time, if Putin were to make another move, release even more hard-hitting sanctions. And now it appears this time has come with this dramatic escalation, really the beginning of this invasion in Ukraine. So I think you can expect to see an announcement of sanctions that really hits at Putin directly and hits at the very high-ranking officials in the Kremlin. There could also be major economic consequences for Russia with these sanctions. And also, I think, for the West, because we obviously know that this is, a double-edged sword in many ways. We've seen the Russians say, well, if you put sanctions on us and if you continue in this direction, your energy prices are going to go up. And I think you could see President Biden very much address that, because although foreign policy is not always top of mind for most American voters, we know that the economy is. We know that energy prices are. So this is where I think the area you'll also see him address.
Julia, the US has been warning of this invasion. They seem to have been right on top of the intelligence in this particular instance. Sanctions have not been a deterrent. Are we likely to see any military engagement, any further support for Ukraine, which at the moment feels abandoned?
Well, it's a very difficult situation, I think, for Joe Biden in particular. Remember, less than a year ago, he faced a lot of backlash for that very botched and chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan in terms of U.S. troops. And we know in general in the U.S., in the years that have gone by since the conclusion or the wrap up of the Iraq War, and then, the situation that's unfolded in Afghanistan since U.S. personnel left, there isn't really much of an appetite for American troops to get involved in yet another foreign conflict. So I think you've seen President Biden be very careful in his wording, saying this was a NATO-led mission. You are seeing very much different, U.S. troops in surrounding countries and helping those countries supply aid to Ukraine. But it's difficult because, he has to walk this fine line because there's always political ramifications back at home.
Secretary Blinken had been, in a flurry of diplomatic efforts in the lead up to this. He cancelled meetings with Sergei Lavrov, his counterpart. Are they going to abandon diplomatic efforts at this point?
It's unclear, and we'll probably hear more about that, about the future of diplomatic efforts, if there are any, from President Biden later today. We know they kept on saying up until the very last minute diplomacy would be on the table. But now with news of casualties, with news of Russia very much moving along with what very much appears to be an invasion, I think at some point NATO, the US, and other Western countries will likely draw a line.
And you rightly point out, Julia, that the economic fallout has already begun. We've seen the markets collapse, very big falls here in Australia. No doubt the American markets will follow suit. And of course, for Joe Biden, he's got the midterms coming up. This is a tenuous time for him to be caught up in this kind of conflict globally.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very difficult time. And, we have what could be in the future rising energy prices, but that adds on top of the situation here in the United States. We're already seeing record high inflation, very high gas prices. We know that Republicans are already hitting Joe Biden and his Democratic allies for those prices. And, I think, obviously the administration is looking at this through a policy lens and wanting to fix the situation in Ukraine. But there's always a political element to this. And if economic conditions get worse for Americans, politically, that doesn't help Joe Biden and his Democratic allies.
Julia, appreciate your time. It's going to be a busy day for you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.